So super excited on this because we had launched a brand campaign like 2 years back, and this has been a long due for us to come up with a point of view. And I think it is a lot of effort has gone into this actually, because we've met over 500 consumers. We had multiple insights to kind of play with, but I think I'm very happy with where we have landed. So first of all, I'll give you an understanding of our core target audience. So
Yeah.
it is primarily Gen Z and young millennials. It's difficult to put a age to it because we say that it's really defined by a mindset. Hence, somebody who is young at heart, who are experimentative, who loves passion, and are actually the early adopters of trend. They're also shapeshifters in some sense because they keep moving from one thing to another. And I think the larger point for us is that we are not chasing demographics, but we are here for people who are constantly evolving, and they're trying to discover themselves.
Right.
The second piece is, as far as the overall market construct is concerned, right? And if you really see the overall watch category, right? Primarily in the watch category, it is divided between fashion and horology. We play in the fashion segment. And in the fashion segment, if you really see that there are certain brands that are playing on aesthetic, right? And then there are certain brands that are playing on story. Fastrack has always been a story-led brand. If you think about our era of rebellion, right, wherein we were trying to challenge, the norms of the society, we were completely a counterculture brand, right? And therefore, we were looking to find that narrative which really is in alignment with the needs and aspiration of our core TG. Of course, the rebel era, which is our move on campaign, was largely driven by a consumer tension. The current campaign is driven by a consumer aspiration, right? And the consumer aspiration that we are really gunning for, today, is that today's youth do not want to be defined by a single choice, right? They have
Right.
multiple choices, and since they have multiple choices, they would like to experiment, play, remix, mix and match, and this entire thing of fluidity and how they seamlessly move from one thing to another without putting a finger on one thing, right? I think that is the one insight that we really caught on, and we said that today's generation is like multiple tabs of screens open all at once,
Yeah.
and therefore this entire narrative of never same, which is about the consuming consumer always changing and is ever changing consumer, and and the reason why, which is the motivation driver for them, they're doing it is because they don't really take life very seriously. They just want to have fun and they want to enjoy that moment, and therefore the choice. So it's never same, never sane. And we thought that it's an interesting articulation, going back to our core consumer segment of Gen Zs. So yeah, so that's what it is. It's never same, never sane. And to really activate this in the market, what we have done is, in the first phase, we went ahead and hired Siddhant Chaturvedi, who is the face of the campaign, and he has gone ahead and adorned various versions of himself, and we thought that he'll be a very interesting fit because, in some sense, he is a music player. At the same time, he's an actor. At the same time, he's a gully boy, and not just in his film, but also in his real life. He has multiple versions of himself. We thought that it will be interesting to play with those versions. Therefore, we have these interesting characters that we are playing with, which is aligned to the subcultures. So one of the subculture that we are kind of playing around with is the music subculture. So we have a music-led collection which is called Groove. The second subculture that we're playing around is with racing. So we have a F1 racing inspired collection which is called Overdrive. And the third collection that we are playing with is this whole thing about travel and really into adventure, which is called Wild. So you have a wild Sid, you have a racer Sid, and you have a music Sid, and how all of these Sids are coming together to really talk about their obsession with that particular subculture and a funny banter between them as to why my subculture is better than yours. So
Yeah.
that's the entire campaign on Never Same Never Sane. So that's the first phase. We've also, heavily betting on outdoors to bring it alive. We've took it already taken it live in 19 cities. At the same time, a very full-fledged digital campaign spreading across Meta, Google, Snapchat, Pinterest, so on and so forth. And we are also doing certain things that we call as acts, because this entire idea to come alive, people need to experience it
Hmm.
fully, right? So hence we are developing these experience centers in malls wherein you can really come and live your obsession, whether it's a music obsession or it's a racing obsession or an exploration obsession. So yeah, that's pretty much the campaign, and we're seeing some really good early results on the campaign. So, like I said, we had met over 500 consumers
Hmm.
personally,
Okay.
and basis which we realized that what is the one thing that keeps all of them together. And it was very difficult to pinpoint that that they're into one thing. If you remember, like, at least I'm a millennial, right? And at best we would be in one or two things, which could potentially be music, Bollywood, so on and so forth.
Hmm.
But today's generation, if you look at them, they are into one. If you just pick up one subculture of fandom, right? They're into multiple fandoms all
Hmm.
at once, right? And at the same time, we realize meeting them is that they are not sticking to one thing, which in some sense we were thinking that maybe is it about the fact that they are very frivolous in some sense,
Hmm.
or they are very fickle.
Yeah.
But we again went back and asked them that is this coming because of fickle mind and something that you're not able to decide, and hence you keep moving from one thing to the other. But they said that no, it is not about being fickle minded. It gives them the freedom to explore, freedom to imagine themselves in various avatars. I think that is what is the one insight that we really caught on. That it gives me the freedom to really uh, explore my identity. That if I'm not one person, I can be many person at the same time. While it might sound confusing, but the more we spoke to them, we ourselves got convinced that given the norms of the pop culture that the society and the culture is really brewing today, it is we are living in the attention economy, right?
Hmm.
And everything that is out there on Instagram, we are consuming the same kind of content, and the content itself is now being customized as per your likes and preferences, right? So if you like memes, Instagram will show you more memes, right? If you like information related content, they will show you more information related content.
Hmm.
If you like music, they will show you more music related content, so on and so forth, right?
Yeah.
So hence this generation, right? Everybody is trying to catch their attention in the attention economy, and therefore they know everything about everything. So they are saying that why should I restrict myself only to one thing
Right.
when I can have many? So we thought that what role can fast track actually play? As of now, from where we were as with our past campaigns, we've seen a 30 to 40% spike. During the COVID phase, we had seen an increased amount of interest from both the younger consumer as well as the millennials towards smartwatches. But I think, every category goes through is phases of highs and lows. I think the high really was then for smart category, so to say, a lot of new adopters were coming onto the category inside the category. And of course, Fastrack was also one of the brand that was there. And a lot of advertising spends were also happening towards the smart card because that's where the wave was. But I think over a period of time, what happened was that as things got normal and people started returning back to normality, what started happening was that the use case for smartwatch, although it was defined as multivariate, but I think from the at least the little research that we have done, we figured that it was very limited. So it would be about productivity or sports at best. So it reminds me of my meeting, etc., and it helps me sponsor my steps. Hence, the consumer not seeing a very great value in upgrading. So I think that's where analog came into picture, saying that, smart could never take the place of analog from a standpoint of an fashion accessory. So it will remain as a utility, product. Smart is a utility product, and analog is more a fashion product.
Fashion product.
And that's when the use cases actually increase.
Hmm.
So now increasingly we are seeing this trend of watch wardrobing. More and more consumers we speak to, we're realizing that they're having at least 6 to 8 watches in their wardrobe. And they have, and the reason they have it is because for every look,
Yeah.
for every core that they are, whether it's a grok core or it is a
Hmm.
Barbie core or it is, vintage core, so
Hmm.
on and so forth. For every core, there is a separate watch that they have, right? So whether it's an old money aesthetics and they need a classic watch for it, they're going to a party, a different watch for that,
Hmm.
right? So I think that's what we are seeing as a huge trend in the market. And I think this trend is here to stay because the same trend is actually manifesting itself even in the fashion apparel market, if you see, and
Yeah.
even in sneakers for that matter,
Hmm.
right? Now, what changed that in the last 2 to 3 years, everybody's having a sneaker wardrobe.
Yeah.
I think this is what has actually changed, wherein a consumer is
Hmm.
going out there and saying that I want to experiment, and for that experimentation, I need different looks. And for
Yeah.
every look, I need to have a different kind of a product. And I think
Right.
that's the entire wave in which we are also kind of participating.
Hmm.
My prediction is that the next economy that is going to come will be about the customization economy.
Hmm.
And I tell you why. Because see, when everybody is consuming the same kind of content, when everybody has access to same kind of products, it is the curation that is going to matter, which will differentiate users. Because that is what differentiated people, back then. Today, it's also the reason why, you see a lot of homegrown brands doing well is because they provided differentiation to users. Now, in some sense, they are also becoming like, oh, now everybody's wearing the same thing. So how can I be different? Right? So then now people have started accessorizing with it through charms, etc. Right? So hence, brands in the future will be able to provide me customized solution to my look and my aspiration and
Hmm.
my identity
Yeah.
are the ones who are going to win. So I feel that the next era will be about the customization economy.
Customization.
I think that's clearly the intent for us that, see, we are a house of brand company, the Titan Company Limited, right? And within that, we have multiple brands. We have Fastrack, we have Titan, we have Sonata, and we have multiple, international brands as well. So I think the core idea, at least for Fastrack, is that how can we be scaling micro communities as a mass brand? Fastrack is a mass brand, but how can I speak into micro communities? Because, culture today is not uniform. Culture is spread, hence I cannot have a one size fits all kind of a strategy. So the shift really is that, can we have a narrative that can speak to all of these micro communities all at once. Therefore, we wanted to crack an insight that speaks to all of these people all
Hmm.
at once. So the Never Same platform actually speaks to them, right? So
Yeah.
hence, I can at the same time speak to somebody, who's a creator, and I can also speak to somebody who is into a subculture like music, streetwear, sports. I can also do platform native content, which is tailored to a particular audience or a particular core. For instance, say I can speak to somebody in Chennai, which has a very specific aesthetic, right? And I can speak to that person in their own language. So the entire platform gives me that width and the depth to actually speak to every single individual and speak to their truth and their reality and their identity.
Okay.
I think that's really the game plan. So I think we have always been uh, a digital first,
Hmm.
uh, brand, and a large portion of our spends currently going digital, at least in the last 5 years. But if you go to the move on era, when we were a rebel, I think the lot of spends were going into TV as well.
Hmm.
But now TV is zero.
Hmm.
So we are trying to build a digital first, cultural first ecosystem. So hence a strong focus is on how can we really dominate on Meta and Google as platforms. How can we have creator-led content that speaks to various niches that I spoke about, the micro communities that I spoke about. right? And how can I have a a platform native storytelling? So, whether it's about the reels or the shots or the posts, so various, how can I really speak to them? And I think a lot of spends are also going into experience, because we're seeing a very good and renewed energy into our traditional retail system. So the Fastrack store, for instance, is
Mm.
growing by leaps and bounds, right? If you look at our other multi-brand retail channels, we look at Titan World, for instance.
Yeah.
All of these platforms are playing very well. Of course, we
Mm.
continue
Yeah.
to do well even in the e-commerce platform, but only if we look at the modern retail, so to say, the brick and mortar, I think that is doing really well for us as well.
Mm.
So we continue to invest a lot in the experience, so to say, in those touch points. I think those are some of the ways in which we kind of split our spend. One more thing I would like to mention from an ATL standpoint, whenever there is a big bang campaign, like we just did Siddharth Dwivedi's campaign, we continue to spend enough and more amount of money also on outdoors.
Mm.
Yeah,
Oh, well,
because
yeah.
if you think about it, the entire digital landscape is very cluttered and it's very
Mm.
difficult to catch the audience there.
Yeah.
But I feel OOH as a platform is something that, at least for younger youth brands, have not been able to, it's not fully capitalized upon. So
Yeah.
we are really trying to go out there and spend disproportionately on outdoors. We did for the Siddhant Chaturvedi's Never Same Never Sane campaign, we did a metro rap in Hyderabad.
Mm.
We did outdoor innovations, cutouts,
Cut
etc.
right.
In our core cities, Bombay
Mm.
uh, and Bangalore,
Fine.
Hyderabad.
Okay.
But it's a well orchestrated plan, in the
Yeah.
sense like we have been nudging consumers to really come and feel the brand.
Mm.
And I think that entire strategy of treating the brand store as a theater.
Mm.
So we treat it as like a theater wherein, a performance is happening. And what kind of an experiential performance that I would like to give to my users. So hence it's about discovery, it's about tryouts, it's about how can I make the place a social currency,
Mm.
which really helps people to make it content led, so to say,
Mm.
right? So we keep doing a
Yeah.
lot of activations in the store where so that our consumers are engaged, and it's one of a kind of an experience. We want to stay a little bit more tactile
Mm.
in our approach. And therefore, that entire shift that I was speaking about, how can I move people from an e-commerce experience to a retail experience, right? Give them the experience of the brand. And I think this generation is really craving it, because if you think about
Mm.
it, they're digitally native.
Yeah.
Most of the time, they're on their mobile devices. And I think they're looking forward to an experience that is tactile and that is something that they can feel.
Feel.
Yeah. So I think I would want to go whole hog on how can I give them an experience that they truly remember.